Welcome to Game Theorem, where we have serious discussions about absurd entertainment.
Pew, 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 pew.
What are you playing?
Oh, I'm playing this amazing video game.
Oh, yeah? What's it about?
Well, you can see it for yourself. Look at it. Pew, pew, pew.
That looks fun. It looks like a really interesting commentary on society.
What? No! It's just a game!
Well, games can have commentary.
No, look. You can call a video game art as long as you're praising it for being amazing, but you can't call it art if you're going to use it to be critical of anything that I hold dear, like the political status quo.
I'm Kira.
I'm Kyle.
And we're talking about video games in general as art, I guess.
Well, we're talking about how video games matter.
Yes.
As a form of media and as a form of art. Now, we have touched on this before. We had a Wide Look episode called You're Underthinking It,
Yeah.
where we talked about how people try to simplify these things and the flaw of the idea of overanalysis. Mm-hmm. But, you know, things have been really intense lately. Look at our last Wide Look episode about cops and Nazis. Mm-hmm. We really wanted to just do a kind of easy, laid-back, Wide Look episode.
So we're going to talk about how games have affected us in our lives.
Right, so this is going to be more of a personal kind of journey, but hopefully it'll benefit you all to hear how these things can affect us and how they can shape us, and maybe share some stories of your own of how they've affected you. Mm-hmm. What did you think of the skit, Kira?
I mean, I think that was funny. Were you referencing the recent controversy over The Last of Us 2?
Oh yeah, recent. Yeah, you know, the one in 2020, in 2019. Oh, and I think it was also 2018 and 2017. And when did Gamergate happen? 2008, right? And then 2007. When Donkey Kong came out, 1981.
Oh my God!
But there was also Atari, 1980.
But there wasn't a controversy about all of those.
I wasn't alive in 1981, but I know there's controversies of that era of games. I know the creator of Mario, Shigeru Miyamoto, did not consider it art.
Oh.
Which would probably be an insult to anyone who loved and played that game.
I mean, okay, fine, fair enough.
I did reference something that is like a duality that a lot of people who identify as gamers talk about. See our episode about there's no such thing as a true gamer. Whereas there's this idea that calling games art is good and great even, as long as it means you get praise.
Yep.
But if that means you're critical of them, then it's not great. Mm-hmm. And a lot of this is pushed by the video game companies themselves.
Yeah,
because
of course.
At the end of the day, they want praise. They want to be treated like a cinema masterpiece, but they're unwilling to take criticism that you would also give to a cinema masterpiece,
true.
or a flop, really. Mm-hmm. Because while movies have masterpieces, there's also just great big flops.
Yeah,
and there's a certain responsibility you have to take, and I think a lot of it is because video games have fought so hard, the people in the video game market have fought so hard against the idea that video games cause violence, that they're unwilling to concede the point that video games can make you feel anything at all to affect your worldview. Mm-hmm. And those shouldn't be mutually exclusive.
Yeah, of course.
Right? Like, video games aren't like a poison in your brain that makes you go out and want to do a violence, right? Mm-hmm. But it's reductive to say that art doesn't have an emotional effect on people. Mm-hmm. And video games are a form of art.
Yeah.
It's like seeing a fictional gun is not going to make you go grab a gun and shoot people.
Yeah.
But playing a game that normalizes militarization might make you lay down and not fight militarization in the real world because it has been normalized for you.
Yeah. That's fair.
That's an example of it affecting your actions, but not just because it's a mean video game, just because it's a piece of art. It's, there's a reason people did book burnings throughout history because they were afraid of what people might learn or experience. 'Cause it wasn't just non-fictional books that were that were burned.
Yeah, of course.
A lot of the times, like religious books are burned, right? And say what you will about religion, those things are chock full of meaning. Like, here I'll say this: if you believe in the Bible, great for you. But if you don't believe in the Bible, you have to at least consider that it's a work of art.
Yeah, true.
Right?
Yeah, that's fair.
And I believe video games are comparable to the Bible. Okay, we're done here. I'm just kidding.
That was another joke for...
What?
That was another joke referencing The Last of Us 2, right? Because The Last of Us 2 is... What was it?
What?
Is the Schindler's List of movies.
No, I didn't. I don't even want to care. I really don't care about that controversy. Look, Last of Us 2 isn't the best game in the world, but it still has value. I mean, it doesn't have to be on either like extreme of the spectrum, right?
Yeah, but you know how people are acting about it.
Yeah, whatever. So anyway, yeah, so that's just some lead-in stuff. I've said my piece. Why don't you go, Kara?
I really feel like video games have definitely been incredibly important to us in particular. I mean, yeah, of course, everyone has a story of video games or whatever, but like the ways they've affected us has been huge in our lives, I feel. They have kind of shaped who we are as people at points.
Yeah, it's why even though this podcast covers things that aren't just video games, it's why we have such a heavy focus on them. Just because they matter so much to us.
Definitely.
And that's fine. Like, there is nothing wrong with that. Well, okay, I guess there's a little thing wrong with that, corporatism, but that's with most media. Although it does seem particularly strong with video games.
Yeah.
Like, game publishers are not nice companies. That's all I'll say on that.
Is there ever a nice company?
I was going to say a dead one. A bankrupt one. There you go.
Well, no, because then the government will bail them out, and now...
Well, it depends on the size.
Yeah.
I was just joking. But there's degrees of meanness, of exploitation.
Yeah, of course.
There's a reason EA has such a horrible reputation.
Well, I think video games have been so important to us because criticizing them has been such a huge part of our lives. And we found so many people that we love and admire through that. Like, we watch YouTube videos of games criticism all the time. Jim Sterling especially.
Yeah. And I think there is some pushback to that because criticism inherently implies that it's a piece of art. Because you're criticizing it.
You know what? I think maybe that's why we like it so much, is that he's treating it as art.
Right. Now, I guess you can criticize something purely as a product, but then you're only going from the end of like how profitable it is and whatnot. And that kind of criticism is just not really interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be helpful to know, but I'm there for the art criticism.
Personally, it's been really hard for me throughout my life to make connections with people and to make friends and stuff like that, just because, like, I was always the weird outcast, even in my own family, and video games have been, like, the one way, the first way, really, that I was really able to connect with people in a way that really mattered to me.
I mean, yeah, I can relate to that. I grew up in a very, ultra-conservative type of cult. And video games were like one of my very few releases, my escapes. If it wasn't for them, I might have had no touchstone for reality because I was being, gaslit my entire life.
For me, our parents really didn't understand video games and weren't interested in them, but it was the one way I was able to, like, play a game with my brothers and play a game with friends and, like, even play it on my own, and it was just something that I loved doing, and no one, like, my parents didn't understand it, and often it was criticized that I love doing it so much. So like,
Yeah,
yeah.
there was one day in my life where basically on that day my parents had decided that I was too old for kid video games, which was anything Nintendo basically. And so I then had to literally start hiding that I played those games. Because they had just deemed that I was supposed to have outgrown them. And it's so belittling to me. Like, I understand, like, some child-friendly games have an intended demographic, and maybe adults there are adult-targeted games, right? But to say that a child-friendly game is all of a sudden valueless because you're supposed to have grown out of it is almost like saying it's a phase. It's almost like saying, oh, that game wasn't worth anything. You were just a dumb kid who thought it was. You should be old enough to know better now.
Yeah.
And I don't like that. That's horrible.
Yeah, I was, I guess, lucky enough that my parents weren't interested enough in the exact games we were playing and didn't understand it enough to have that view.
Oh, they were happy to get us to start playing Grand Theft Auto as soon as we could.
That's really disturbing, honestly.
Oh, yeah, and we did some really disturbing stuff.
And, like, I don't have much in common with my family, but the one thing we did together was play games together. And it was like, it was my favorite thing to do with them because I at least felt like I wasn't being judged by them and we could all meet on common ground kind of while playing together. And, you know, it was rare. My family didn't play together quite often. I wasn't very close with my brothers. Like, I would play GameCube games with my brothers, and that was like Super Smash Bros. Melee. That was one of the most important. That was my favorite Smash Bros. Game because as much as I sucked at it, I still really liked that that it was the one thing that they would play with me. Because, you know, icky girls don't want to play with me.
Ugh. Thanks, Nintendo. Nintendo is the one who decided that games were for boys.
Oh, great.
I mean, let's be real. They were always going to do that. The boy toy market was larger than the girl one. But it was still wrong.
Yeah, of course. I remember with Super Smash Bros., I would literally, like, you know how you could take pictures in that game? I'd literally go into a stage by myself, pick a character, and make up a story and take pictures because I would play it alone. Because,
Aww.
yeah. Are there any games that you remember from your childhood specifically that really helped you connect with people or that really were really important to you?
Okay, so we're getting into the point where we're going to start like actually listing the games that really emotionally affected us in our development.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I mean, I've talked about this before, but you know, we're going to compend them all into this episode. Mario was a really big one for me. I was super into the Mario series. This was back before they started churning them out like products, where they actually tried to make the Mario games standalone and thought-provoking. You know, like Super Mario Odyssey was an attempt to call back to that era of Mario. And it felt very shallow compared to the experiences we had. I'm telling you, Galaxy is far superior to Odyssey.
Yeah, all right.
Odyssey's prettier, but please, I don't need pretty. Like, Odyssey's pretty, but Galaxy is like majestic.
Yeah.
And then Sunshine's just kind of a romp. But my point is the reason I think Mario really had an effect on me was Mario kind of taught me that everyone can be equal, that it doesn't really matter if you're human or an ape or a dinosaur or whatever Birdo is. Well, Birdo is a Birdo named Birdo, like Yoshi's a Yoshi named Yoshi, and Toad's a Toad named Toad. But it just, like, I always liked the idea that you could have, like, all these multiple characters that could just, like, play games together and have fun. Obviously, you know, I've talked about they didn't do race very well, and even gender was, you know, with their human characters, it wasn't very good representation. So I would have a few blind spots for a while. But I think Mario kind of was, like, the epitome of my idea of what it meant to be good. And it sounds fundamental, but I really don't think we're taught those things these days. You know, in our capitalist society, we're taught that taking advantage of other people and trying to profit off of them is a virtue. And I think Mario was just kind of like, no, have fun. Live your life.
Yeah.
And if someone comes along starting trouble, Bowser looking at you, don't let them. Stop them.
Mhm. Yeah, I never played any of the earlier Mario games, but I do remember playing Thousand Year Door on GameCube.
Oh, yeah. And then like, every now and then they would have the brilliant story of a Mario game, like Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door.
Yeah, that was the one I played, but I never beat it until I played it with you. But yeah, I remember playing that when I was younger.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it helped generate empathy. And empathy is such an important thing that we just don't have enough of in this world.
Hmm.
And like I remember feeling such immense empathy for Vivian in Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door being abused by her sisters.
Yeah.
And that's why I feel Mario taught me empathy. And it's horrible that had to be taught to me.
I'm sorry. Kirby Air Ride was
Oh, that was a good one.
Yeah, I used to play that with people too. That was really fun. And again, sometimes I would just play by myself to explore the stages and to see what I could
But
do.
what did it teach you?
Um, it really equaled the playing field a bit for me because I would always get my butt kicked in Super Smash Bros. Melee and was always super bad at it. But with Kirby Air Ride, because there were different challenges based on different things, I actually really had fun playing with other people and didn't always feel like I sucked at it.
Oh, I think that's interesting because so many games are combat focused. You basically learn that combat is not the only realm of expertise.
Yeah, I guess so. And since that was one of the few games I actually played with other people, that really resonated with me, and that I really wanted to play that more than other games. Yeah, I also wasn't good at it, but it was at least a more even playing field, it felt like to me. Like, it was at least close, you know? I could gain on other people or, like, beat them in a challenge or something like that.
Cool.
Mario Party was also really important to me for that reason too, because a lot of it was luck based. So yeah.
Cool. I think Pokemon was a really big one.
Oh my god, yeah.
Pokemon basically just taught me how to socialize with human beings.
Oh, because you traded and stuff.
Not just that. Like I had a whole collection. I literally had something I called the Black Poke Market. Like I was like an auctioneer. I was like trading left and right. And then, of course, I got into the metagame battling eventually. And I still have my old Pokemon team, but there was a long period of my life playing Pokemon where I think it just really helped me socialize with people, gave me a common interest. And I think that's what Pokemon really helped give me.
That's amazing. I feel like because I sort of only got into video games a little later, like with other people, not just my family, that I didn't really socialize with other people like that. I never really got into the community as a kid.
I got really isolated later on in life, so I had to specifically seek them out online.
Mm-hmm.
I was on this website called the Pokemon GTS.
Oh,
and
I see.
I kind of wince thinking about that because I'm sure I was a horrible person.
Oh my god.
And that transitions me to my time with zombies.
Mm-hmm.
Call of Duty zombies specifically.
Yeah.
Shout out to any of our listeners who are fans of that. Shout out to the one listener who still goes by the name of Dr. Richtofen.
Mm-hmm.
But Call of Duty Zombies really taught me how to analyze media. And like, I'm not going to say I was great with like thematic analysis of like understanding the motif and the purpose of the story.
Mm-hmm.
I was still kind of blind to that. I mean, that's I think one of the harder types of analysis that requires a much larger vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be a while before I got to that, but I think really Call of Duty Zombies really taught me the ropes of analysis.
Oh yeah.
To really pick the pieces of a story and put it together and to try to understand a very complex narrative, one that specifically wasn't going to give it to you easy. Because I think that's something we kind of take for granted these days, is that most stories in any type of media, they just spoon feed you the story. But I think some of the best ones don't do that. They make you have to work for it. They make you have to put two and two together, right? I mean, we don't have to go into it now, but we were just watching a movie last night, Kira.
Yeah.
If you remember that movie, like, if you're just watching the literal actions that are being performed, you won't get half the subtext.
Yeah.
Because some movies expect you to actually do some of the brain power on your behalf.
Yeah, you know what? I think I really learned that with like Oblivion, the first game I played that actually had a huge story and an open world. Like I learned a lot of analysis with that because like you made your own choices, so I would have to decide what to do, and that made me analyze some situations.
And I mean, honestly, Kira, I think sometimes you have a harder time when it comes to making decisions in general. If you're okay with me outing that.
Yeah.
So I think that game was probably what helped you to at least get to the point where you are now with making decisions.
You know what? Probably because like I played it when I was a teenager, when I was younger, but like for the first time, and it was really the first game I ever played that actually taught me that games can have such a huge story and be so important. And I was already empathetic and cared about characters and stuff because I read a lot. So like
you were pretty much more natural at that than I was.
yeah. So like my empathy guided my choices in that game, but I had to make choices. But I still cared about the characters enough that I tried to make the choices for specific characters. I liked certain ones, I didn't like others, that kind of thing.
Right. I do want to mention that with Call of Duty Zombies, though, there was a whole conspiracy theorist angle bent to it. The way you had to analyze and research and put puzzle pieces together is a lot in the same way that conspiracy theorists do. It made many references to that.
Oh.
Now, these days particularly, the idea of conspiracy theories has a lot of connections with, racism, sexism, anti-Semitism, the far right, the alt-right. A lot of really problematic stuff. I mean, QAnon's a thing now, which is basically a direct sequel to the idea of conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
Or at least the conspiracy theorist movement. That's all bad.
Yeah.
But I still maintain to this day that there is an innocent version of conspiracy theories and conspiracy theorists. Conspiracies do actually happen.
Yeah.
The idea that we have of them, particularly today with all those things I mentioned, is that there's a large group of people that just put the pieces together to say whatever they wanted to say. And I would argue that's actually being a bad conspiracy theorist. You're more like a conspiracy hypothesis.
Yeah.
And that's actually one thing that I came up against a lot when doing Call of Duty Zombies. When arranging the story and whatnot, I can't tell you how many times people were like, well, what about this? And I'm just like, there's no evidence to support that. And that is such a huge thing that I think some people forget about. And unfortunately, I think a lot of conspiracy theorists were kind of pushed out of those communities. They were too strong on actually having evidence. And then now we kind of live in this world where what's even true and whatnot. Not that I think that, but a lot of people do. So I think conspiracy theories still have value because honestly, we talked about our bias. We're anti-capitalist and whatnot, right? But some conspiracies are real, and some of our ideas of problems wrong with the world, like, you have to have conspiracies for them. Does that mean that there's a secret cabal of people that are specifically doing a specific bad thing?
Yeah.
Possibly. It happens.
Yeah.
But does that also mean that the people in power, 99% of whom are men, may carry some ideas about what it means to be manly and create a concept of patriarchy that affects the way we're allowed to speak and culture in the world because of the biases of the people that have the most power in the world? Possibly. In a way, the ideas of capitalism, patriarchy, white supremacy, these are conspiracy theories. The question is, do you think that a few group of people are directly responsible for everything? Or do you think everyone is to a degree guilty and some people just have more power than others? And I mean, obviously I lean on the last one.
Yeah, of course. You're completely right about that. And my first exposure to that idea was actually Oblivion. because like there was this whole storyline which was kind of like a Robin Hood storyline, but there was corrupt guards.
Yeah.
There was like this the first time I actually was into that like saw that concept of like a corrupt guards, taxation, people left to fend for themselves on the street and what that meant, and like the sort of Robin Hood idea of like take from the rich and give to the poor, of take care of your own, that kind of stuff. That was I think Oblivion was my first exposure to those kinds of ideas, and I think maybe that helped me realize that, you know, of course I thought those ideas were good because they were presented in a very consumable way in that game.
Right. It's like with what you're talking about homeless people. Is homelessness a problem of a group of specific people, i.e. the homeless for being homeless? Or is it the result of actions of a much greater swath of people being complicit, but not any of them particularly directly responsible, gauged by the level of power they have? Mm-hmm. And that's really what it is, and that's what that game kind of showed you. The homeless people weren't homeless just because they had character flaws. That's pretty bigoted, actually. They were homeless because there was an empire in control, or a kingdom or something.
It was literally an empire.
Right.
Yeah. And that was so funny because, like, that's the first time I had a real issue with authority. I mean, of course, I've had issues with authority in that I was, like, upset with teachers and crap like that. But, like, this was the first time I was like, no, these guards are wrong. I'm going to do what's right. Mm-hmm. And, like, I did all the optional stuff, too, to try to help the people. And it was because I understood that it was a corrupt system and that it needed to be taken down from the outside.
Nice.
And it was... I got to be like a fucking... what is it? Like, go against the establishment with a group of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I think that's a pretty cool idea.
Yeah. I remember playing BioShock. I think BioShock really affected me.
Yeah, I played that with you when I first visited you, and that was when I really concentrated the idea of capitalism and how awful it was.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And
I literally didn't even think of it in that way until I played that game with you, and like it really cemented my anti-capitalism.
Yeah, I played it a lot younger, and I didn't fully get it. I didn't understand everything it was going for. Mm-hmm. And part of this is because I had to play on my father's PlayStation 3 that was in the middle of the living room, and my parents were always talking and never being quiet. They wouldn't let me have the volume very loud, so I couldn't understand everything that was being said. Mm-hmm. But I did glean some information. And after beating BioShock, the idea that I walked away with, the thing that it really taught me, the way it affected me, BioShock taught me that capitalism is wrong. Mm-hmm. And here's the thing. I wasn't an anti-capitalist at the time. I was born in the ultra-conservative cult. I thought capitalism was a good thing. But BioShock put a ceiling on for me. BioShock taught me, like, okay, we get it, but there is such a thing as too much. Right? Mm-hmm. And I honestly would argue with that today. I would say any capitalism is too much.
Yeah.
But it gave me a point of no return. Like the rest of my family, for example, they went on to think, no, ultra capitalism, super capitalism, feudalism, fascism. But I had this idea of, no, there is such a thing as too much capitalism. And to an extent, I think even my family would have agreed to that. They'd be like, well, of course, we can't have child labor, right? Mm-hmm. But they only say that after it's been banned.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, other injustices are happening, and they're like, no, super capitalism, please.
Yep.
Meanwhile, I felt BioShock was a great distillation of, like, the Ayn Randian, like, capitalism going unchecked kind of idea.
Yeah, definitely.
And that, I think, really affected me and taught me that regardless of how I feel about it, if you give everything you've got into this one idea, it will backfire. Mm-hmm. It is not a good system in totality. So if you look at my journeys on the political spectrum, BioShock set up a hard wall for how far right I would ever go. And I am very appreciative of that.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really interesting.
And I was really invested into the story.
Yeah,
and
when I played it with you, I was too.
Yeah, and it makes it very clear about how like Andrew Ryan, the big capitalist of that game, effectively becomes a fascist. There's a reason everyone is like spliced and like turned into monsters in that game. And he's the only one who isn't. And you know, his whole confrontation speech. Okay, we should move on.
Yeah. I will say something else about video games is I was really depressed and anxious as a teenager a lot. And video games were a really good outlet for those feelings. I honestly, I could attribute it to other media too, but I honestly think if it weren't for video games as something for me to obsess over and look forward to.
Is there a specific one?
The Elder Scrolls games really kept me going because there were hundreds of hours of content.
More than just Oblivion?
Yes, Morrowind too.
Oh, okay.
And I played Skyrim when it came out and stuff.
I'm so sorry.
But yeah, and like, honestly, if it weren't for video games and some other media, I probably wouldn't be here today. Because that stuff really kept me going.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I don't think escapism is always the answer. I'll say that. I do think there are things worth fighting for and not running away from. But as corny as this might sound, sometimes you need a safe space. And most people, I would argue, at least in America, their safe space is their video game. It's ironic that a lot of like alt-right gamers complain about safe spaces while they're shouting that from their literal safe space.
Yeah.
I just think that's funny. Okay, so what else? Well, I guess I have to talk about Fallout New Vegas.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that game. It is my favorite game of all time because it taught me politics. The Fallout series I always had a thing for, but it was Fallout New Vegas that really crystallized that and took it to a political extreme, I guess you could say.
You know, for me, when I was younger, that was Morrowind. Because there's so much politics in that game.
Yeah, but I feel the Elder Scrolls being the fantasy thing, the politics are a bit more dated. They're about empire.
You replace those words with modern terms and you would be very surprised.
Possibly, but I think it disassociates it a bit.
I suppose so, but it introduced me to a lot of ideas.
New Vegas is a lot more overt, I think.
Well, yeah, of course.
I mean, literally each of the factions you choose in New Vegas, with one exception, is an extreme on a political diagram.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
The Legion is authoritarian right. Mr. House in New Vegas is anarchist right. And Yes Man in Independent Vegas is is anarchist left. And the NCR, well, okay, they're not authoritarian left. They're really just kind of neoliberal.
Yeah.
But yeah, so...
Yeah, I definitely think it's way more effective.
Yeah, and I spent so long just siding with the NCR, not realizing it was status quo.
Me too. Because I didn't always play it with you. I mean, I never beat it on my own, but, you know...
Yeah, so, we're doing a Fallout playthrough now called Cinema of Fallout, so we're, trying to retroactively fix this and play it the right way now. So if you want to check that out, it's on our YouTube channel.
Yep.
But yeah, I really appreciate New Vegas doing that, because, I think too often we think of politics as a series of value judgments, and not actual pragmatic problems looking for solutions. I think it's good to have an end goal in mind. I think that's very good, actually. But even if you're looking at an end goal, you're looking at solving the problems that exist now to get to that point.
Yeah.
And I think so, especially when you talk about Twitter and whatnot, and people arguing, there's so much like leftist infighting, for example.
Yeah.
There's so much purity testing.
Mm-hmm.
And I find often if you just present a scenario, a choice that's difficult and makes you actually try to choose between your values, something that the game Fallout New Vegas does often, and I think magnificently. Many of the mods for it too, in Fallout 3 even to an extent.
Yeah.
They are a bit reticent to make that choice. You know, like sure, I'm sure plenty of leftists are on board with the idea of sexism being bad and racism being bad. But if you give them a choice, you have to choose either a sexist option or a racist option. They would be reticent to try to say which is better, more important. Now, I am simplifying the choices here.
Yeah, of course.
Right. And I'm not going to give an answer to that one word choice. We would have to look at the context and the problems and the solutions to really weigh these things. And to do that, you have to actually put your politics and your values on the line. You have to actually stand for something rather than just spouting what you believe. You have to act on it. And we're doing this in the safe space of a simulation. Because there are times where you actually have to do this in real life. Portland is under fire. Anyway, video games?
I will say that Morrowind was a really good introduction to racism for me.
You're talking about Morrowind again?
Sorry.
I understand it was very important to you, but could you maybe pick a different game?
But there was actual racism in Morrowind, and that was something I'd never seen in a video game before. And
yeah, the games are notoriously very stingy when talking about racism, because for so long the target demographic has been white men.
Yeah, exactly. So like that really, like, okay, I'm not white, okay? But I didn't truly understand the depths of what racism leads to and the horribleness that it enables until I saw it for myself in that game.
You had a kind of whitewashed upbringing, I would say.
Yes. Because there was slavery and I wanted to end it. I was horrified. And like there was lots of xenophobia. There was a whole thing about indigenous people. It was a really interesting political situation that really had me learning about how racism and xenophobia affects society, like on a societal level.
Yep. And like I appreciate science fiction stuff like the ghouls in Fallout, having a fictional race be oppressed to talk about racism without being too overt in it. Because I understand sometimes that is necessary, you know? Like throughout like the golden and silver ages of science fiction, a lot of science fiction authors specifically use science fiction as a gateway to talk about systemic issues of their time. I mean, Star Trek is literally a communist utopia.
Yeah.
And was one of the first shows to really have a diverse cast.
Yeah.
At least for the time. So I can understand that, but I feel it has a disadvantage that if you keep doing that and you only do that and you never make it overt enough, people can get comfortable with thinking that this bigotry is only fictitious. It's easy, especially among the Fallout community, for people to think racism is just a thing that happens against ghouls, because racism isn't real anymore. We solved that with the Civil Rights Amendment.
Yeah,
Which is garbage, obviously.
Yeah, I didn't realize how...
So white.
Yeah, I didn't realize how real it was. Like, the thing is, I didn't stop at just being introduced to the racism in Morrowind. I saw that racism, and it helped me draw parallels to things in real life.
I mean, like, we're a few episodes ahead of what's been released for Cinema and Fallout so far. But there have been so many instances of anti-indigenous racism.
Yes.
And it's not even like just an individual character, like there's a racist character. It's across the writing to where the writers are racist against indigenous people.
Oh my god, yes. And I hate to bring up Morrowind again, but the indigenous people in Morrowind, you learn about their culture. And you learn to see them as people as
Wait.
others don't.
But wasn't Skyrim pretty racist against Romani people? The cat people
yes.
are a stereotype
Yes.
of Romanis.
Yes, Skyrim got to the point where literally only in Skyrim, because
Because Skyrim's the
there
worst
were
one.
yes, there were parallels beforehand, but in Skyrim they just made it kind of blatant.
Ugh.
So yes, they won't even let the Khajiit in the cities in Skyrim. They have to camp and travel and stay outside of the cities.
I mean, if they wanted to do a parallel and use that as a gateway to talk about their oppression,
I would love that, but there is zero question in Skyrim about that racism against the Khajiit, whereas there's a bunch in Morrowind.
Okay. Any other games we can talk about? Well, it's not really a game, but Homestuck really affected us.
Yeah, Homestuck literally
There's games in the series.
Yes, there are games in the series.
I think Homestuck just taught me that, because Call of Duty Zombies had a lot of problematic elements, and a lot of these other franchises we talk about have them too. You'll be hard pressed to find one that doesn't have any, but there's degrees.
Yeah.
And Homestuck taught me that you didn't have to be nearly so problematic to have a really good, complex story.
Yeah.
And Homestuck's not perfect either, but it's a lot better.
Oh my god, yeah. Homestuck literally changed my entire life. I wouldn't have met you and be here today if it weren't for Homestuck.
We really gonna do a Homestuck episode after we finish Danganronpa.
Sure. What did you want to be as a kid? What was the job you wanted when you grew up?
Well, when I was very young, I kind of wanted to be a vet because I liked animals, and then I stopped that once I found out that meant I'd have to see blood.
Uh-huh.
And then I was like, okay, well, then I want to make video games.
Yeah, I wanted to be a scientist, and then
I humored that for a bit, but never seriously.
And then a forensic scientist, because I wanted to do I wanted to do medical tests.
You fell for the CSI trap?
A bit, because I was young, but I did research into what they actually did, and I still wanted to do that.
Propaganda.
Well, yes. But I still wanted to run tests and stuff and, be a scientist. And then I got a little older, and I realized that I wanted to do programming, and then specifically video games. And so, that wasn't even something I realized I wanted to do until I had played video games a lot and really fell in love with them to the point where, I wanted to make them.
I mean, yeah, I kind of wanted to play video games, or make video games, but it would be a while before I really learned what that entailed. And
I did research on it, and that's how I specifically figured out I wanted to be a programmer. That's the part I wanted to do.
Unfortunately, I grew up in late stage capitalism, and the entire game industry market is just, oh my goodness, you have to basically be a slave. They take advantage of their workers so much.
Yeah, I know.
Did you know they specifically like to look for asocial people? People that don't look like they socialize very well? Basically the nerd stereotype.
Wow.
Because they don't want you out partying. They want to try to get people that they know will be willing to work as late as they want.
Wow.
I saw a thing on Twitter the other day where someone was saying, when I'm looking for a programmer, I ask them, what do you code? And if someone says, oh, I don't really code in my personal time very much because I'm always coding for work and I do my own thing at home, the answer is wrong. You need to be coding all the time. You need to be working on your own code in your free time. And a lot of people were calling out this post saying that this is like interview exploitation 101. They're trying to gauge if you're the kind of person who's willing to work long, late hours 24/7.
Yeah.
If you code in your free time, that means you'll be willing to code for them in the evening.
Mm-hmm.
And we just really need gaming unions.
Yeah, but yeah, of course, that dream busted when I actually became an adult.
Doesn't everyone's? What are dreams anymore?
Yeah. I really wanted to make stuff, though. I always have. I really got into crafting and stuff when I was a kid because of that desire to make things.
I am genuinely interested in what's going to happen to video games once society ends. I don't think our society is going to last another 20 years.
I mean, I agree with you. I think it could possibly be even sooner.
And look, at the risk of getting explicitly political, I'm just going to make a prediction. The United States president is not leaving office in November. I am not saying whether he won or lost, but he will not be leaving. That is my prediction. And take from that what you will.
Yep.
I'm just saying, some year we're going to have basically the equivalent of looking back on and be like, oh, this was the last American-developed video game.
Yeah.
Let's say it's this year, right? We can look back at, a year ago and be like, oh yeah, the Outer Worlds came out a year before the end times. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying humanity will die. I'm saying there will be an after, a new era, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know what that era is going to be. And I'm hoping there's still video games, but imagine what form they might take. What if indie games become the norm? Although it depends on the state of technology.
Yeah, exactly. But even if there isn't technology, people will still make games. Cards, tabletops.
Card games and tabletop games will have a renaissance.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case, because you find those and you can just play them. And you can keep them. They don't require electricity.
You know how Monopoly was originally stolen by Hasbro and ripped off from the woman who had originally invented it, and they didn't pay her, and it was originally called the Landlord's Game, being inherently critical of capitalism, and they just stole it and co-opted it. Mm-hmm. I wonder if our generation's going to have a Landlord's Game.
Maybe.
Hopefully there'll be no one to steal it this time.
Yeah.
Any other video games that affected us?
I never thought Animal Crossing New Horizons would be therapy.
Oh yeah, I could see that. Mm-hmm. Mental health, basically.
Yep.
I mean, for you anyway. I couldn't stand to play that game.
Yeah, I know.
I have too much crap to do. I don't have time to spend 10 minutes picking a lemon.
Okay.
The game does not care about your time.
And that's why I time travel.
I guess we can wrap it up. I know there's other games that have affected me. I'm just having a hard time thinking about it right now.
Let me think.
Did Portal teach me anything?
Portal was one of the first games I tried to play with an online friend. So I could say that I had online friendships before that, but I never played games with them. And
I like Portal, but I think it's too divorced from any particular issues for me to really get that much out of it to learn.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I think it's still a great story. I love the game, but I don't think it really taught me anything.
Fair enough.
Oh, okay. It taught me that moon dust is poisonous.
Huh.
What else? What are some other games we play?
Oh, we played Inside and Limbo.
Okay, I mean, there's a lot of little indie games. I guess I was just thinking on a larger scale, things I played for a significantly longer period of time.
Yeah, fair enough.
Danganronpa.
Oh, yeah. That, to be honest, I can say that might have been one of the first games or something, whatever you want to call it, that I actually literally cried about a video game.
What does Danganronpa teach you?
Truth, lies, hope, despair.
Ha, funny. I feel Danganronpa's more experiential. What?
I feel like it kind of shows you a bit about the human condition. You place people in this situation and you manipulate them into doing these things.
Yeah, because every entry in Danganronpa, on the face of it, you could walk away with what I think is a deplorable lesson. I hate it when any piece of media does this, where they specifically say, Danganronpa is about how when push comes to shove, humans are disloyal, unfaithful, backstabbers that'll turn on each other and kill each other. Humanity is awful. We're the real bad people. That to me it's a necessary precursor to fascism.
Mm-hmm.
where your whole identity is based around like, well, humans are inherently bad. We're just the exception, because that's the next step,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I detest that, but Danganronpa goes from there and takes a different step.
Mm-hmm.
Danganronpa says, despite the fact that they're put in a situation where they benefit from backstabbing and killing each other, despite that, inevitably, the group will work together to thwart their circumstances for the sake of cooperation and working together to build a better world.
Yeah, it really shows that, because yes, that happens all the time, but then you realize that they were manipulated into it, that there was an evil trying to make them do this.
That
and
evil just being people in power.
Yeah, and that evil does get blamed, absolutely, for everything that happens.
Yeah, as much as I like Junko, she's still a piece of crap.
Yeah, but like literally, Monokuma tries to tell them, see, look how they turn on you, look how they betray you, look how awful people are. And Naegi goes, no, you did this, it's your fault, you're manipulating them. It isn't anything inherently bad about them.
And later on in the series, they do talk about like how effective is hope, really, that motivation to work together. If it's only temporary and in the moment, then you're just allowing future bad things to happen, right? Mm-hmm. Like hope is not necessarily victory, because hope is just hoping for better. It doesn't mean you're actually doing it. Mm-hmm. So the last game in the series actually does a great job of revealing the falseness of the choice between hope and despair. Mm-hmm. That sometimes you have to look out of a binary option.
And it's a very meta game, so like it really teaches you a lot about meta narrative as well.
Yeah, so I think honestly it's a good point. Yes, choose the better of your two options, but don't even stop there. Look for something better than the two options.
I think that happens pretty often though too, because like in the second game they're like graduate, don't graduate, and they
I guess you could see the themes lying there, but it was always still under the guise of hope.
Yeah, fair enough.
But yeah. So I think the Danganronpa games, for better or worse, for all of their flaws and problems, and we go into that in our Danganronpa episodes, I think ultimately have a story about that counteracts the idea of humans just being untrustworthy beings, which is a garbage narrative, and I'm glad it has a message against that.
Yep.
We gotta wrap up soon. You got any other ideas? Any other honorable mentions or anything? I have so little time to play games these days. Being an adult stinks.
Yeah, it stinks. And to think when I was younger, I couldn't wait to grow up.
How did Undertale affect me?
Undertale was good at subverting expectations, I feel. It was interesting in a way that most if you're sorry, what?
I got it.
Okay, yeah.
Undertale is about how monsters are who we say they are.
Really?
Yeah, it takes a pretty old trope of an idea of where it turns out the human was the real monster and the monster was actually good. I mean, it's literally a Frankenstein thing.
Yeah.
If you're not aware, basically the idea of Frankenstein is there's always people that go like, oh, well, Frankenstein was the monster. And then you'll have people that go, no, actually, Frankenstein was the doctor. And then there's the people that actually understood the book that say, no, Dr. Frankenstein was the monster. Mm-hmm. I took that bit from Curio. They were the ones that thought of that. That was great metaphor. Yeah. So there's the people that get it, the people that don't, and the people that get half of it and think they understand it in that scenario.
Yeah.
So Frankenstein was like the first sci-fi book.
Yeah.
So Undertale's not exactly treading new ground with that, but I do think it does it magnificently in the magnitude of it, because that is effectively the whole plot. Everyone you find is called a monster, but they're more human than you are. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, especially the way, like, Undertale is an indie game for people who play games for the most part, because people who play games, like, look at that, and the first thing they do is they kill the first thing they see, because
Yeah,
that's what you always do in games.
The game expects you to be conditioned to play it wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
All right, well, we gotta wrap it up now. I really like talking about this. It was definitely a lighter episode. We'll probably have something more serious later.
Yeah.
I-
All right.
I hope you listen to it. And I know we delved in some serious topics, but I don't know, sometimes matters of the heart get serious.
Sure.
But it's been fun.
Yeah.
Check out our Cinema and Fallout series.